If you were to tell me in 2019 that this game would be the most accurate thing to what would happen all next year, I would have looked at you sideways. But here we are at the beginning of 2021, and playing this game is probably the most satirical thing you could be playing. Hopefully we're over the worst of it and it doesn't get as horrible as what happens in this game. For those that don't know, Plague Inc. Evolve is the upgraded version of that phone app game simply titled Plague Inc. It's a simulation game with a pretty simple concept: create and control a disease to wipe out humanity. Sounds grim as fuck, and the devs had to be some type of nihilist to create this, but it's not as grim as you might think since you can't really see what your diseases does to people. Yeah, this world map screen is what you're going to be looking at 90% of the time, the other 10% being the Plague upgrade menu. Yeah, even if I didn't tell you that this game was a port of a mobile game, you could probably tell that this game doesn't have that high of a budget. It's just menus and still images. But you know what? That's okay, since watching your disease spread throughout the map as these red dots is surprisingly satisfying. Also, what this game doesn't have in fancy smashy presentation, it makes up for in ease of use. Part of that has to do with how simple the gameplay is, which I'll get into later, but a major part is just with how intuitive the UI is. Only takes a couple of glances to understand what's going on and what you have to do, which is one of the reasons why this game is popular amongst a fair amount of people that don't even like these type of games. Not too many menus to navigate or numbers to understand, which makes for an easily digestible experience even for the other game modes and pathogens. So you got a lot of diseases to work with here, everything from a normal virus to a goddamn zombie apocalypse. The rules for most of them mostly remain the same though. Infect and kill everyone before doctors can make a cure. The later modes add a bunch of stuff on top of this to make things not as straightforward, but we'll get to those convoluted shits later. For now, let's start with bacteria since it's the basic pathogen that every other mode is built upon. So in the beginning of each game, you have a choice of which country your plague can emerge from. This is probably the most important decision of each game since where you start massively dictates where your disease will go and how you should upgrade it. The reason for this is because every country has characteristics that you have to adapt your disease to. So with a country like China, it's a very urban country, so upgrading your plague to where it transmits through rats absolutely decimates a country like it. Or with a country like Russia, since it's cold as shit, you have to give your plague a cold resistance or else you won't affect nothing. Speaking of which, countries like Greenland and Iceland are gonna have you like, and the reason is because they're cold island countries that don't get a lot of travel, which means what often happens is that you'll affect every other country, your disease will be noticed by these countries, and as a reaction, will close all their ports and borders with no way to affect them, which is essentially a game over. So the most optimal strategy is to start in one of the countries that are hard to get to and make your disease as infectious as possible, but also keep it hidden until the vast majority of people are infected before making it fatal. This is especially true once you realize that the more severe or fatal your disease is, the faster doctors will work on a cure, and once they have a cure, there's no way to stop it from eradicating your disease. So it's pretty fun for a little while trying to figure out different starting countries and disease paths and seeing all the different ways you can evolve your disease to kill everyone. But then after winning and trying out other scenarios, you start to realize that the same damn strategy works almost every time. What I mentioned before, where you have to wait until everyone's infected and then dump all your points into making your disease as fatal as possible, yeah, that's the go-to strategy almost every time, and often the only way to win. The reason for this is because you're severely underpowered when it comes to trying to stop international efforts in combating your disease. Once your disease is discovered, the only ways to slow the process of a cure are one-time use progress bar reductions that are just a measly 10%. There's that, and the genetic hardening, which slows the speed of the research, but quickly stops mattering once your disease is at least a little severe and doctors stop fucking around. Apparently clicking on these blue cure icons also slows down the cure, but I saw no difference. Since some countries also close borders and ports pretty early if your disease is too severe, the only real way to get everybody is to limit the lethality of the disease as much as possible, aka the strategy I mentioned before. There's other plague types that throw some curveballs that try to get you to do something else. Like with fungus, it can't travel very far, so you have to constantly spore burst that shit into other countries. Or with virus, it's constantly getting new symptoms, so you have to keep evolving it. But even with these quirks, the way to win is still the same. The only instances where I had to switch up what I was doing was with bioweapon and the special plague types. Bioweapon definitely gave me a hard time since the lethality of it keeps on climbing, and it seemed damn near impossible to infect everyone before killing everyone off. It wasn't until my dumbass realized that you were supposed to keep resetting the lethality with gene compression. The special plague types such as simian flu and shadow plague definitely shake things up the most though, with a couple of more systems to keep track of. Arguably too many systems to keep track of, because I didn't know what the fuck I was supposed to do going into these modes, and it's not like the game really tells you what to do either. So simian flu was on some Planet of the Apes type shit where on top of plaguing everyone in the world with some monkey disease, you also have to break out and raise a colony of intelligent apes and use them to fight against humanity. You have to constantly upgrade your ape's abilities through the same way you evolve diseases. The difference is that you have these active abilities on the side here that you have to use to move your apes around the world, set up colonies, and destroy bases of these Gen Sys lab guys who speed up the process of a cure. All these new mechanics are definitely welcome and add a new layer to the original gameplay loop, but the same problem of only one way to win still remains. For this one, you have to make your apes as strong and as smart as possible before doing the usual strategy of stealth killing everyone. You see, for whatever reason, when you're raising ape colonies around the world, no one really seems to give a shit. It's not until you make the flu very infectious and then all of a sudden the humans want to wreck your shit. It doesn't matter if your apes are just minding their own business too. Once they discover the flu, they link it to the ape colonies and then start killing off your apes at a rapid rate on top of working on a cure. And it's not like you can just use the flu to eliminate the humans, since you need apes alive to win this mode also. So yeah, this one is cool for a little bit, but only for a little bit. What about Shadow Plague? Well, it's definitely the hardest one, I'll tell you that. Instead of an army of apes, you have one alpha vampire that you have to control and keep alive. This motherfucker is always hungry and constantly feeding off of a country's population too, which means that he's constantly killing off a shitload of people and alerting the world of its presence fast. And since humans aren't exactly cool with some monster feeding off of them, they'll eventually go after your vampire and kill that bitch. Similar to the simian flu, the strat is to make your vampire as powerful as possible while also limiting the spread of your disease until your vampire is strong enough to take care of everything. Once again, you have lab geeks around the world that speed up the process of a cure that you have to take care of. But you also got these Templar industry guys that set up strongholds in different countries as well. You gotta kill them all off in order to win. I said that Shadow Plague is the hardest one, but in some ways it's the easiest one, because if you buff the attack of your vampire enough, you can wipe out an entire country in seconds. Once it gets to that point, you don't even need to use the Shadow Plague. I'm pretty sure that this is the definitive strategy anyway, and like Simian Flu, it's cool for a little bit, but once you figure out the way to win, it's not really something to go back to. So what about the custom scenario? Surely there's something there with some depth.
Nope.
Most of them are just reskins of bacteria. So for like fake news, instead of spreading a plague and killing people, you're spreading false info and deceiving people. But really, it's all the same shit. It's just that everything with fake news has everything retitled to something involving fake news. So like infectivity is now virality and lethality is now community. But like I said, it's all the same as what you do in the main game, and a lot of the other custom modes are the same way. The Ultimate Board Game one was pretty fresh though. You're given 2 years to create a bomb ass game and sell it as much as possible. This one actually flips the formula where instead of conquering the entire world, you're given a certain time frame to get as many people as possible, which is pretty refreshing. Anyway, if you've been paying attention to this review up until this point, then you've probably picked up on what my main issue with this game is. It's too fucking shallow. There's not enough ways to go about infecting humanity, and the ways that you do go about it are practically the same almost every time. If you played any other competent strategy or simulation game, then you know that this is a big drawback. A good simulation game is like crack, you know? It keeps you coming back and for long hours at a time, because there's usually a lot of different mechanics to learn and mess around with. With this game, after you've beaten bacteria, then you've already seen most of what this game has to offer. It's by no means bad. In fact, it's probably the best game that does this whole disease simulation thing on the market at the moment. It's just not anything to write home about in the long term. Hopefully that new cure mode that's coming out soon changes that. Anyway, that's all I gotta say about this, so until next time.